It's 2015, and the game Super Mario Maker has just released for the Nintendo Wii U. The game's defining aspect was that anyone could now create their own Mario levels, meaning for the first time, a Mario game's difficulty was only limited by the creativity and determination of the player. The vast majority of the levels uploaded were similar to what the millions of those who have played Mario were used to, but a small subset of players were determined to push the game's engine to its limits, and entered the race to create the hardest Mario level. Well-known challenge runners made the most impact, with levels such as Pit of Panga P-Break and Mr. Carl's Wild Ride, and traded the title of having the game's hardest level. But Panga's next level would blow all of the previous out of the water. Pit of Panga U-Break was a 50-second long level utilizing item juggling, consecutive shell jumps, and mid-airs. The race was heating up, but an unknown 17-year-old was about to make his mark. Braden Moore, otherwise known as Chain Chomp Braden, had secretly been working on a level that would take the title. While Panga and Carl's levels were no longer than a minute, Braden's level was more than 5 minutes long, containing its own long list of hard tricks. The problem was, with him being a newcomer to the battle, it was taking him a considerably long time to beat the level himself in order to upload it. Dozens of hours flew by, with him being unable to complete the marathon run all the way to the end. He would get closer to the end of the level, but just couldn't get over the hump. He would die multiple times on the last trick, but refused to take any shortcuts. It was a matter of time until everything came together, and he would be the creator of the new hardest level. After a total of 74 hours of attempts, Braden managed to upload the level, which would go on to shock the community and arguably take the spot of the game's hardest level in many people's eyes. In the description of his clear video, he talked about how putting in the work to upload the new hardest level had pushed him to his limit. But, at the bottom of the description, were some harrowing words. Little did everyone know, Braden's words weren't an over-exaggeration, but rather an understatement. His next project would put all of these levels to shame, continuously push the boundaries of what a human could accomplish in a video game, and become the source of so much public criticism as a result of how unimaginable the challenge was. This is a story quite unlike any other level grind. This is the story of the impossible level. This is the story of the trials of death. If you spend a lot of time at a desk, you already know how much a bad chair can mess with your back. That's why I've been using the FlexiSpot C7 Max, and honestly, it's been a huge upgrade. This chair is built for long sessions. It has adaptive lumbar support that actually moves with you, so you're not constantly readjusting or slouching halfway through the day. The mesh back keeps things breathable, and the seat stays comfortable even after hours of sitting. In fact, one of the reasons our videos have historically taken a while to be made is that I've dealt with a lot of ergonomics issues with my previous equipment. The FlexiSpot C7 Max chair has helped with a lot of these issues, and has opened up more time for me to stay editing these videos for you guys. What really stands out is how adjustable it is. You get a deep recline, a fully adjustable headrest, and 5D armrests that move pretty much any way you would need, whether you're typing, leaning back, or just trying to get comfortable. You also get a 30-day risk-free return policy, and a 10-year warranty with direct replacement, so there's zero stress trying it out. If you want the best price, use my code C750 to get $50 off. The link's in the description. And if you're still deciding, FlexiSpot also has the C5 chair as a more budget-friendly option, or their new launch C7 Morpher, which features upgraded lumbar support and an improved upper backrest. You can check out their full chair lineup linked below and pick what fits you best. Thank you to FlexiSpot for sponsoring this video. Braden greatly enjoyed the ongoing battle for Mario Maker's hardest level, but knew that any host of players would eventually be able to put the time in to create and beat a marginally harder level. So rather than keep making incrementally harder levels, he decided to make one that, if beaten, would forever be considered the hardest Mario level. With that being the core purpose of Trials of Death, he began its creation. However, its original design was mainly just a blueprint for what it would come to be. The level's original design was around just as long as his previous level, but made up of much harder tricks using the game's items. Trials of Death took inspiration from its predecessor, but took things beyond. Whereas there was some downtime and leeway in the prior, Braden wanted the easiest trick of Trials of Death to be harder than the previous level. Eventually, on December 6th, Braden finished his first draft of the level, and began official attempts on it. The original layout of Trials of Death was complex, but could be broken down into 3 sections. The introduction of the level, up until the pipe to enter the subworld containing some of the level's hardest tricks, and then the final section of the level, which was focused on managing up to 5 shells at once on the path to one final shell jump in order to finish the level. The majority of Braden's attempts didn't make it past the intro section, which was partially because of the bomb ladder, which requires Mario to spin jump on the correct side of a bomb, send it into the wall of springs, and then repeat that process in order to slowly gain height. Afterwards, he would have to use the spring he was carrying in order to damage boost up to the pipe that would lead him into the subworld. Around this time, Braden was only putting about an hour a day into attempts, and wasn't making too much progress towards a clear. But to be fair, that's what he expected. For months, he would only get a few runs deep into the subworld, and none to the final shell jump section, and the chance of him getting there anytime soon was about to get a lot lower. On March 9th, 2016, 95 days into the grind, Nintendo released version 1.4 to the game, which added a couple new items to the game such as red coins and key doors, but an unexpected consequence would be a key change to the physics of the game. Trials of Death utilizes a lot of item jumps, which are tight tricks that require Mario to drop an item and then jump on it, often in midair. For some reason, the new update changed the frame data of P-switches, and made it much harder to time P-switch jumps, which given the situation, would make the trick have only a 3-frame window. The P-switch jumps made the subworld even more deadly than it was before. However, Braden refused to remove any of them from the level, refusing to take any shortcuts in pursuit of the completion. Braden's stubbornness irked a few, and when they would find out how much time he had spent on the level so far, they made their opinions well known. More days would pass, and although progress slowed down, Braden started to accustom himself to the heightened difficulty of some of the P-switch tricks, and over the coming weeks, he passed 100, then 200 hours of attempts, and his consistency with the very beginning of the run finally began to improve, as for the first time, he got back-to-back runs past the first screen, and a couple days later, he got a run only about 20 seconds from reaching the final section, this being on day 236. Braden's slow progress wasn't only a result of the level's base difficulty, but also due to small additions to the level he was making in order to increase the precision of the earlier parts of the run. But perhaps the biggest buff was the new transition to the end of the level, which was changed from just one shell jump to multiple, including one while riding Yoshi in order to enter the pipe. And that change would end up putting an end to 2 runs that seemed destined to reach the final section. It seemed bound to happen, that now, after 300 hours of attempts, he would get his first shot at the final section, and if by any miracle's chance he was able to fluke it, that would be it. The grind would be over. Fortunately, Braden would get his chance 2 days later, but unfortunately, would die on the first jump. However, to many following the progress of the grind, the fact he finally got to the final section of the level was great news. The journey had already been more than 4 times as long as his previous, and the sign that it could be ending soon meant that a new hardest level would finally be released for everyone to play. But for Braden, after reaching the last section of the level, something felt wrong. Late one night, he would give people a rare insight into his current mentality, where he talked about how reaching the final section of the level for the first time made him realize that the level didn't hit his idealistic vision of being near impossible. Given his progress, he had been planning to make another level after Trials of Death, but now, he decided that instead of beating the level in its current state, he would scrap the future level, and add everything he had in his mind to Trials of Death. He decided that reaching the final section in only 300 hours wasn't enough. Trials of Death was going to be his impossible level. He found himself closing in on his goal, but decided to go back and make this mountain of his that much harder to climb. For a full month, Braden broke down each part of the level and ramped up the difficulty. Buffs varied from small placement changes in order to introduce tighter timing, to doubling the length of sections, and straight up adding new ones. In this 1 month, Trials of Death became something much more intimidating than the original, and one of the biggest reasons was that the level was now 3 minutes longer. Braden had only been about 20 seconds from completing the level, but now, his best run was bumped back to only about 60% of the level. Braden's attempts on the harder version of the level didn't come without their own challenges, as he didn't get any notable runs deep into the subworld for a while. He passed 400 hours of attempts on the level, then 500, still without any runs even close to the final section. In the meantime, he started streaming his attempts on Twitch, and the amount of people following the grind continued to grow. Many people in chat would try to convince him to make the level easier in order to have better runs take place on stream, but Braden refused, because he knew that when he started getting closer runs, it would be because he earned it. On day 453, nearly 200 days since his previous best run, Braden got a run about 85% the way through the level, dying on one of the last tricks before the final pipe, and then 2 weeks later, he got a run even further, marking easily the best run he had ever gotten since the recent buffs. Finally, after over half a year, Braden was starting to reach a level of consistency that he had with the earlier version of the level, and it seemed like a matter of time before he would get his second chance at the final section of the level. He continued to inch further, as on day 489, he got a 93% run, but it felt like given the time he was spending on attempts, he would spend nearly as much time adding more buffs to the level. At this point, he had passed over 800 hours of attempts on the level, and an additional 700 hours practicing specific segments and buffing it. On day 591, for the first time in over 100 days, he got a run to the second last screen of the level, which he started to officially label as a Final 4, since this pipe meant he had reached one of the final 4 sections before the finale. 1 month later, he had gotten his second Final 4, and then on October 2nd, 2017, he booted up his stream for a regular night of attempts, and on his first attempt of the night, this happened. His third Final 4. Up to this point, since the biggest wave of buffs, his runs near the end had been very sparse, but slowly, once again, they were starting to become more consistent. The final 4 sections before the last door that were ending Braden's best runs were as follows: the Yoshi section, where he had to jump between 2 Yoshis to stall for time, a similar bomb stalling section, a falling item jump section, and finally, a Yoshi shell jump. All of his final 4 so far had died on the first Yoshi section, including his 4th, which occurred on day 700. His 5th Final 4 would also end on the Yoshi section, but his next, only 2 weeks later, would finally get over the hump. Braden would get past the Yoshi section for the first time, but then die immediately after to one of the bomb stalls. Still, progress was progress, no matter how slow. The fact of the matter though, was that it had been over 2 years since he started attempting the level, and that even though he was starting to get more Final 4s, that's all they were, not even attempts at the real last section. At the same time, the day counter continued to rise, and it seemed like he may reach day 1000 before even having a real attempt at the end. On day 944, he would get a run that would make it to the Final 4, make it past the Yoshi section, then the bomb section. Then came the item drop section. In unprecedented territory, Braden failed on the last trick before the Yoshi shell jump. In the description of the Twitch clip, he stated that this was primarily because of nerves, but over time, with the right mentality, those nerves were bound to fade, and he would be able to play on point in order to get his shot at the clear. On day 980 of the grind, he had done it. He finally got his first shot at the end. Although he died on the very first jump, this attempt was very significant, because it meant any mental block he had was now gone, and the biggest barrier between him and the clear was now the last screen. Braden had experienced this pattern before, being unable to get to a section of the level, then finally getting there, but dying right away. The thing is, the next step in that pattern was getting through it, but in order for that to happen to him, he would need to get another attempt to that point. It had taken him nearly 500 days to get his first attempt at the last screen, so perhaps it would take him 500 more to get his next. Or maybe it would happen much sooner. On this attempt, Braden was able to successfully perform every trick on the final screen, but missed the setup for one of the final shells. If he threw this shell up at the spring just a few frames earlier, it would have been in the right position for the level's final jump. Just a few pixels prevented what very likely would have been the clear. 1,000 days into the journey, for the first time, he could truly see the end. Even though it wasn't the clear, this attempt was great news. It proved his earlier nigh wasn't a fluke, and did a great job at sharpening his nerves for the future. Braden was now playing a different game. He wasn't just trying to set new best runs at some ambiguous point in the level. He was now aiming for the peak of the mountain, and even though he wasn't aware of how hard it would be, it seemed like it was finally possible. Having 2 runs to the final section in the same month was a wake-up call, that the perfect run might come sooner than many thought. Braden had proven he now possessed the skill to be able to beat the level in its current form, that there was no trick he wasn't capable of getting past, besides one. He continued putting in more attempts, racking up a couple more final 4s, but didn't have his next shot at the shells yet. He would add a couple more buffs, but nothing game-changing. In anticipation of the next nigh, Braden's full time on attempts rose above 1,400 hours, meaning that so far, he had spent nearly 20 times as long as he did on his earlier level, that supposedly pushed him to his limit. And that was not including the near 1,000 hours he had spent practicing the level and buffing specific sections. As well, the 3-year anniversary of the first day of attempts was right around the corner, which was a day to think about the journey so far, but also what he was trying to accomplish. The day was going pretty well, as he had gotten a decent amount of runs into the subworld, and even one run to the bomb laps right before the final 4, but rather late into the stream, he got another run into the subworld, and then to the bomb laps. Braden would keep his nerves strong enough in order to make it to the final 4, and past them, in order to secure his 3rd shot. After 3 months, Braden's next attempt at the end would fall short. He would have tens of thousands of attempts in between each shot at the end, which is a lot riding on just one chance. As well, in practice, he had decent consistency with the final section, meaning that it was just a matter of getting enough attempts at the end in order for it to show. Braden put his head down and kept putting in the reps. Despite a notable lack of runs in the beginning of 2019, Braden had only been averaging about 2 runs to the final 4 per month, all dying before the final door. But on day 1204, he had his next attempt. Braden pulled off a save despite failing the Yoshi shell jump, and then managed to nail the trick in order to lock in his 4th attempt at the final screen. This attempt, similar to his second nigh, made it to the very last trick of the level, but this time, he didn't miss the shell up throw, but rather, barely missed the second last shell. This run was objectively the closest to the clear, and renewed the belief in many people's eyes that the upload would be soon. However, Braden didn't let too much time go by without adding more small buffs to the level, with the most notable being replacing the final Yoshi shell jump with a triple B-switch jump, which was even harder than it looks. A trick with such difficulty was the ultimate gatekeeper to any potential attempts at the final screen, and in the next 4 months, he kept up his rate of about 2 Final Fours per month, but this time had a tougher time converting one through, potentially due to the new addition. But on day 1340, he would achieve the next Final Four, and have his shot at the gatekeeper of the final section. Braden's 5th attempt at the last screen went exactly as the prior 4 months ago. 136 days of practice, attempts, and improvement, all just to fall short in the exact same way. Still, he stayed optimistic, and once again locked in for more attempts. In recent months, Braden had been averaging about 2 Final Fours per month, with 1 attempt at the final section for roughly every 8 of them. So statistically, his next chance at the clear would come in late December or early January. However, Braden still started his attempts every day as if that was the day. But as time went on, he got more Final Fours, but none of them made it to the final section. And slowly, time went on all the way until late December, when the stats said he would get his next shot. But despite what the stats said, the run wasn't coming. On the night of Christmas, over 3 years since his personal message regarding the level, he posted another. He mentioned that he wanted the level beaten more than anybody, but that in a way, he didn't want the clear to happen right now. He felt that over time, he lost the nerve-wracking feeling that he used to have during close attempts. When he got better at the level, it started to feel stagnant, which is why he kept making all those little additions to it. But all those little additions continued to push the eventual clear further down the road. Braden mentioned how Trials of Death was unlike most level grinds or world record attempts, being his 2 perspectives. When he was playing the level, he was the player in pursuit of the unbelievable clear, to make the impossible level possible. But as the creator of the level, him clearing it would bring the impossible difficulty of the level into question. That's why, for every close run he had, he would buff the level even more to make the next one more unlikely. In a way, he was his own worst enemy, and it seemed like no matter what happened, he would lose in some way. Either he would never be able to beat the level, or he would, and the difficulty ultimately let him down. However, he stated that his ultimate goal was to win from both sides. Although he wasn't sure what it would look like, he wanted to create the impossible level that would drive him crazy, but also be the person to overcome all the obstacles and beat it. But going into 2020, Braden didn't slow down his attempts, nor his habit of further buffing the level. One of these buffs was to make the thwomp midair 50 seconds into the level even tighter, making it arguably the toughest singular trick in the level. That, and other changes to the Final Four, made Braden's next shot at the clear take longer than expected. He passed 50 Final Fours in total, and 15 since his last shot at the clear. And then out of nowhere, this happened. If Braden had just let go of the B button just a few frames later, he would have hit this midair and made it to the axe. As heartbreaking as it was, progress was still progress, meaning the next improvement to his best run would almost assuredly be the clear. After this nigh, Braden caught a new wind. He would start to stack more and more Final Fours, even getting 2 runs there in the same hour. The stats were saying the time was soon. On November 25th, 2020, Nintendo announced that the upload feature for Super Mario Maker would be shut down on March 31st, in about 4 months. Why this mattered was that Braden needed to clear the level in order for it to be uploaded and other people be able to play it. Braden made it clear, although the announcement was a little bit of a letdown, he was going to continue attempts until he cleared the level, regardless of if it could be uploaded to the online servers. Despite how he felt, he received a lot of pressure from others to make the level easier in order to get the upload out in time. Braden continued attempts as normal, albeit he had to deal with more pressure and comments than average on his live streams. As time went on, those wanting the level to be uploaded before the deadline were becoming more impatient. However, on March 24th, there was a reason to think they may soon get what they wanted. On the average day, Braden's streams would be anywhere from about 1 to 3 hours long, but today, he committed to over 8 hours of attempts, presumably as one final push to get the clear before the servers went down. His best run made it to the Final Four, but died during the Yoshi section. Afterwards, he decided to do a couple practice runs of the Final Four, and managed to beat them first try. Braden ultimately wouldn't clear the level before the upload feature got discontinued, meaning that other players would not be able to attempt his creation if he were to go on to complete it. Many people thought this was the end of the journey. If no one else would be able to play his level, what was the point of putting in who knows how many more hours into the grind? Braden was transparent with everyone that the servers going down didn't mean that he would stop attempts, but some of the same people who had been overly critical of his journey years ago, and his current perceived failure at his goal, continued to make their opinions known. At this point, Braden was in the middle of the longest span between attempts at the final section of the level he had ever had, being over a year since he had seen the final screen, and that slump continued. He passed over 3,500 total hours on the level, amassed nearly 40 more Final Fours, yet still wasn't able to make it to convert any of them. However, on the 97th, this would happen. Braden had failed the final trick before the last screen, but luckily, none of the P-switches were triggered, meaning that if he could set the trick up again, he could save the run. Braden would miss one of the P-switches in time, and his dry spell of attempts at the final screen would continue. Passing day 2000, he would continue to stack Final Four attempts, except this time, bringing more of the runs to the final P-switch jump. Unfortunately, his nerves proved to be a problem, as he couldn't convert any of them. Until... another run would end the same. A year and a half later, the Trials of Death grind was now nearing its 7th year, meaning that for the better part of a decade, Braden had been attempting one level. Was he always bound to continue this cycle of getting close, buffing the level, building his consistency back, only to fail on the very last jump? Would there come a time where people stopped believing in him? Braden's attempts started to become more sparse, and had less success. For the next 6 months, he wouldn't have any runs near the final screen. In fact, he started to have a dry spell of attempts even reaching the Final Four. All the while, doubters continued to make their opinions known. Whether it was pressure, fatigue, or bad luck, something needed to change. On day 2287, Braden announced that for the first time since 2016, he would stop live streaming any of his attempts. Having time away from stream was still a time for reflection. Would the moment still matter if no one was watching? Were his occasional nerves a product of the attention or pressure he put on himself? At the end of the day, even if no one cared, and no one else would ever be able to play his level, why was he still doing this? At its core, Trials of Death was a personal challenge. Braden took it on himself in order to create his own personal hellscape and push himself to his limits in order to complete it. He wanted to make the hardest level ever and be the one to beat it. So it didn't matter what other people thought, or if this journey took 4,000 more hours. He was the one capable of bringing this whole journey to an end. His nerves didn't have ownership over him. He wasn't in pursuit of more knives. He was in pursuit of the clear. His past attempts at the midair were a couple frames too early. Now, this one was just a couple frames too late. Braden kept the pedal to the metal. At this point, the level was running out of buffs that could be made, as nearly every sprite available was being used for something. However, Braden added one last buff to the level, being a tougher setup for the final shell midair. His consistency began to reach an all-time high, with him getting 2 Final 4 runs on the same day, including another run that got to the P-switch jumps. A few months later, he would get 3 Final 4s in one day, with nearly 2 of them getting to the P-switch jumps. At this point, his next shot of the clear seemed imminent, and it seemed like his 9th shot could be the one. He had been practicing the final shell jumps every day, so that when the next time came, that would be the run. All it would take would just be a couple more reps. He had been on this journey for years, having worked multiple jobs, went to college, graduated, and the Trials of Death had been with him all that time. He had played the level enough to know that his consistency was reaching that level again, but this time, there were no more buffs he had left. He just needed to push through, and he would be granted, potentially, his final shot. On September 29th, 2022, nearly 7 years since the battle to upload the level began, Braden had a run that showcased just how buffed the level had been since its creation. Making his way through the final 4, all standing between him and the final section was 3 P-switches. Finally, he had his next chance at the shells, the section he had practiced over and over again, all to make this attempt worth it. Of all the ways to fail, this was probably the most heartbreaking. At the end of the hardest level ever made, a simple jump over a spike was what put the seemingly perfect run to an end. Over nearly 7 years, Braden had only 9 chances at this final section in a run. So much practice and pressure went into these moments, and this time, when it looked like everything was going to come together, a singular spike, not the hard shell midairs, put an end to it. According to the stats, it would take Braden a couple hundred more days, or even more than a year until he would get his next attempt at the midairs. He would have to get about 20 more Final 4s, about 300 more hours of attempts, 5 failed runs at the P-switch jumps. Who cares what the stats say? He did it. The first emotion he felt was denial. There was no way, after so long, that it actually happened. The chat flooded with messages, full of people who joined throughout the 7-year journey. Those who never gave up on him, and even those who doubted him. The night of the clear, and the days after were surreal, with him getting tons of attention from popular figures and media outlets online, as well as tons of people from his own personal life congratulating him on his accomplishment. Even though the trials of death was his own personal goal, the amount of obstacles he had to overcome, and the discipline he showed throughout the journey, served to inspire many, and grew the completion to a level of influence he never imagined. At last, he was content. He made the impossible level, and was the one to beat it. As a creator, player, and an inspirational story of what is possible when you never give up, he won from all sides.